Hey Ingrid, how you doing?
I'm doing pretty good, Flo. How are things over on your side of the world?
Pretty good, pretty good. Went for a walk around a lake this morning. Had some time to contemplate what we're talking about today. Definitely spent all of that time thinking about today's topic. What are we chatting about today?
Today, we are talking about, I think, everyone's favorite characters, the Michelson family. So we could start with the question: who is your favorite out of all of them?
Well, this is tricky because I feel like there are layers of Mikaelsons. It's a bit of an onion because there's obviously the main crew on the Vampire Diaries, which is, we're talking primarily about the Vampire Diaries here, but there's also all the kind of like add-ons, the DLC in the
The DLC
in the
Michelsons.
spin-offs. Yeah,
Mhm.
which is very rude because they're my favorites, but like sometimes the DLC is superior. I would say my favorite is probably Marcel, but I feel like he intentionally doesn't call himself a Michelson, so it's a bit of a
Yeah,
me fake fan behavior to call him my favorite Michelson. So I'd probably say Klaus of like the kind of originals. How about you?
really? Okay. I would have to say Rebecca. She's
Mm.
she is amazing. I do love her. I can get behind Klaus a little bit. I think that he's charming and charismatic, but I would have to say Rebecca for me.
I just love him because he's like a huge bitch. And I just
He
love the
is. He is a
mess
huge
that he
bitch.
causes all the time.
Hmm.
I just think he's his entertainment value. He's not necessarily the person I'd want to sit down and have like drinks with necessarily
Hmm.
because he's so difficult, but I like his problems. I like his problems. So for working through our quite substantial list of people today, uh are we going to drop down in sort of age order, oldest to youngest? Does that sound good to you?
Yeah, that makes sense. So the first one would be Freya, right? She's one of the
Yes.
DLC Michelsons. So
Yes,
just
she is.
checking.
Although I'm pretty sure she's mentioned on TVD because they mention that they had a child um, before they moved to the new world, in quotation marks. They had a child who died of a fever, I think they mentioned in the Vampire Diaries. And then I'm explaining this to you because I'm assuming that you don't know because you didn't watch the originals.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and then it turned out that what actually happened was Esther was barren completely. She couldn't have children, and she
Hmm.
betrayed her sister in order to marry Michael and like marry into, because like Michael and his people were basically kind of like oppressing, from what I understand, oppressing Esther and her sister Dahlia's people. And then she basically had to go back to her sister and say, "I'm so sorry, help me have babies." And Dahlia said, "Yeah, okay, but your firstborn belongs to me. You have to give your firstborn child to me, and the firstborn of every single generation that comes after belongs to me, because the firstborns are the most powerful in their like
Okay.
bloodline." So Freya was like taken. And it's super traumatic and really upsetting in a like a terrible scene because she was allowed to live with them until she was like 6 or 7. So
Okay.
Finn would remember her, and I think Esther was just pregnant with Elijah
Hmm.
when Freya was taken. So she
So
was kind of brought back in. Yeah,
the only one who was like raised with her would be Finn, and even
yeah,
for that, it was just a couple of years. Okay. All right.
yeah. And it's like part of his damage is that he they took Freya. And like she's just gone because he
Okay.
saw it happen, and then he knows that his mother lied about what happened because she told Michael that Freya died of the fever. So, which
Of
is
the
really
fever.
terrible. Yeah, the fever. There's like people just die of the fever every time something old timey is happening. It's just classic, classic. So I would assume that you don't have a ton written down about this Freya, who you don't know. But what's your like overall impression of a big sister figure who could come back into the family dynamic as you understand it?
Oh, that's interesting. I know that she is a witch, and I think
Mm-hmm.
that could lend some interesting aspects to the big sister dynamic because I don't know, she could use her magic to sort of
Drop them on their
get it.
asses.
Yes, basically to get everyone in line. She's the one driving the SUV. She's she's the
Mm-hmm.
one. I don't know. Um, but honestly, I don't know enough about her to like
Mm.
to be able to say. So, what do you think? What are your ideas for Freya? Would you change anything about her in our revamp? Would you put her in like the Vampire Diaries?
Mm.
We're already thinking like, are we going to? Are we also going to reboot the
The
originals. But before we do that, do you think that it would be worth it to put Freya in the original series?
I think
In
that
the-
Freya would have a lot of interesting. I think that she brings like a whole new level to, for example, our understanding of Elijah as like the big brother in the Elijah and Klaus dynamic. And so as like there were so many cool parallels to Damon and Stefan and Elijah and Klaus, and then all of a sudden Freya like really steps up that whole like I'm your big sibling and I'm more powerful than you, or I'm more like careful than you, or I have all these different qualities that you don't have, and I'm trying to tell you either tell you what to do or we're disagreeing about something. I think she would have brought something cool to that in a vague way, but I also think that I don't know, I didn't totally vibe with Freya's edition, which is like on the originals, which is quite heretical to say because
Mhm.
like I like her wife more than I like her, and I find her I find that she just embodies a lot of what was already happening in the Mikaelson dynamic, and I think that a lot of what she does could have been achieved by Finn if he was just brought back and made more interesting. And so
Mhm.
like I guess for girl power reasons and giving Rebecca a sister, that's cool to have Freya there, but I wasn't always really sure why. Like why did we have to do that? um like it was kind of twisty, but yeah. And I also didn't like the whole plot line that brought her back in. It was like all like the aunt who abducts you and like saps all of your life away. It was like just a lot of old kind of fairy tale tropes that I don't necessarily love for a few reasons.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
yeah, that's Freya for me at least.
Okay, that makes
Mm.
sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do think that because there's so many of them, they do kind of sometimes end up serving the same roles
Mm-hmm.
because they do shift. I don't know the people that they are aligned with, especially in
Mm.
the. Well, they do that a lot in the in TVD. So if, for example, Klaus is suddenly a bit more cozy with the gang, the
Mm.
core gang, I guess, then you have Cole, who has a similar personality. He's like just as wild and unpredictable and sadistic, but now they're on sort of different sides. So
Mm-hmm.
they're just recycling the same traits, I guess. So I can see where you're coming from. Maybe it would be a bit much to add her. Okay, all right, that
Mm.
makes sense.
Yeah, I don't dislike her, and I think that it's nice for like nostalgic reasons to see her like for example on Legacies come into that and talk to Hope and stuff like that. But yeah, I think that her dynamic with Finn was the most interesting to me because it kind of brought
Mm-hmm.
an element to him that was completely different, because all of a sudden we know that he saw his sister being stolen and he knows that he exists and all of his younger siblings exist because she was stolen and taken. So
Mm-hmm.
him having that knowledge gives him a dimension that makes him slightly less of just a huge and giant bore. And another thing that was revealed in that time period is because it's almost said as a joke on the Vampire Diaries that Klaus daggered Finn for 900 years because he was boring. But what
Mm-hmm.
Finn basically explains on the originals is that being daggered for that long, this is kind of similar to what Damon actually says about the humanity switch. Damon says the humanity switch stops working. You like it stops working eventually. You can't have it on forever. It comes off. Fionn basically said that you come back into consciousness after you've been daggered for a really long time, but you're still trapped. So like you're just aware of the pain of being daggered and of being trapped there. And so he's terrified of his coffin and stuff like that. You're just aware of that.
Mm-hmm.
And none of the others had ever been daggered long enough to actually know that. And then he's like killed off a few episodes after revealing that. So it's like the cool dynamic there is gone. So
Yeah, I think that Finn had a lot of potential. I guess he was interesting in that aspect, and pretty much only that aspect, because the sort of self-loathing, judgy vampire who doesn't want to be a vampire, I think that's been done. But I think
mm,
that I guess it serves as an interesting contrast to the rest of them because,
mm,
except for Rebecca, most of them are pretty okay with the idea of being a vampire.
mm-hmm,
Rebecca wants to be human, but not necessarily for any moral reasons. It's because she wants to live a life as a human and like have a
have children.
family and
Mm,
yeah. And for Finn, it's more like I think that we are abominations and I hate myself. So
mm,
I like that aspect to his character,
mm. I
but
think
they don't lean as far enough into the whole. self-loathing Byronic hero with him
Mm.
as I think that they should have. So if
Hmm.
anything with Finn, I would like to play that up a bit more. Just like
Yeah.
have him be very dramatic. Yeah.
Hmm. Do you think him having Sage kind of undercut the whole like mournfulness of him, like him having this like faded love who was hanging around? It's like he obviously like at one point from what I remember he kind of like pulled away from like, oh well, maybe we shouldn't all die and stuff like that because Sage is here and I love her.
Hmm. Hmm.
Like do you think maybe kind of eliminating that influence and really kicking up like his like actual anger, not just at Esther, because he was never really angry at Esther for trading Freya. He just kind of saw everybody else as undeserving in
Hmm.
comparison to Freya. And I think that actually playing that up and bringing that in to the Vampire Diaries would be more dynamic and like make him less boring there. Because I don't understand
Hmm.
why he would not have mentioned those things. So I just assumed that the writers hadn't decided that these things had happened when they originally wrote him on TVD. So I
Right.
think like
Hmm.
bringing all this context up would make him a lot more interesting.
Hmm. Yeah, it's easy to say like in hindsight that
Mm.
um, there are these other aspects that could have been explored, but they probably just didn't think about it at the time.
Mm.
And to answer your question, I like the idea of Sage being, I don't know, a weakness in the sense that it's the one moment where he sort of gave up his principles and turned her. Because if I remember
Mm.
correctly, he was the one who turned her, right?
Oh, I'm not sure actually. I'm gonna look her
I,
up. It will say
I
on her wiki page because it always says who
mhm,
turned them. Yeah, Finn turned her. So
mhm.
that's actually really interesting. I don't think I'd really processed him turning her, like him actually turning her into a vampire. So yeah, you're right. That is actually really interesting.
Yeah. So I guess they could have focused more on that if he had been alive for long enough on the original show on TVD. It's really hard to say
The
like on the
original
original
show
show
versus the
because
originals.
there's a show. Yeah, it just it's so much. But yeah, I think that there's one aspect where it's interesting if he has a mortal lover that he's like super torn up because she's going to grow old. But also that's been done. So I do like the idea of him turning her because he doesn't want to be without her. And that's the
Mm,
moment where he gives in to everything
mhm,
that he hates about himself, I guess. So
mm. It's like Edward and Bella 900 years in the future. Like if that was actually
right.
a really toxic dynamic, it's like let's actually
Hmm.
play out that cognitive dissonance in this relationship and see what actually happens. And it doesn't
Hmm.
have to end
Hmm.
happy
Right.
because things don't end happy for a lot of these people.
Right,
Speaking of
exactly.
which, speaking of which,
Oh
Elijah,
god.
do you have anything written down for Elijah?
I found it was super interesting while I was going through the DVD wiki that most of the Michaelsons have an entire article just on their appearance.
Seriously.
Yes, that is true. And it started with Elijah because I was going down the list, and Freya and Finn don't because they're not as like important,
Mm.
so
Does
to
Hope?
speak. I don't know. I didn't check if Hope did, but Elijah
Mm.
does, and I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, that's
But
funny.
Elijah is the one that brought us together. If you
Yes,
know, you
we
know.
did. We
But
did love. We did appreciate him on the Vampire Diaries originally. I believe.
mhm, yeah,
Yes.
he was an interesting character for all of his. I guess that this air that he puts on that he's honorable and that he's civil and he's more civil than his siblings,
Hmm.
but is kind of a big hypocrite and kind of the biggest hypocrite out of all of them because he can
Yeah.
be like just as awful as the rest of them. So I
Mm.
like that. I think that's interesting about him. What do you think?
I loved him on the Vampire Diaries for the reasons that you just outlined. I do like a stylish hypocrite. I think that they're always really interesting,
And
and they
he is
bring
very
something.
stylish.
Yes, he's very stylish and very hypocritical. I
Hmm.
think what really where the like wheels kind of fell off on Elijah's character, kind of when the wheels fell off on the originals for me. Like
Hmm.
the show itself kind of lost that, I don't know, this really important and integral tension between Elijah and Klaus, because Elijah essentially just becomes equally as bad as Klaus, if not worse, at certain points.
Hmm.
And so we had lost that kind of like pseudo moral center, if you could even call it that. At a certain point, you just end up with Elijah hanging out with vampire Nazis and only really having a problem with that when they threaten his family. And like at that point, like I feel like this kind of taps into an issue with the Mikaelsons generally, which is they are so old and they have lived through so many terrible, terrible things in history, and they
Mm-hmm.
are claiming to have founded a city that was founded actually on like a very long and violent history of slavery, and then they didn't really do anything about that on the show.
Mm-hmm.
Like they don't
Right.
really care about that. So at a certain point, like the hypocrisy isn't funny anymore. Like I just
Yeah.
don't like. I'm not in love with what it's looking like anymore. And he also acts like children in their family exist to benefit Klaus specifically. Like he does this twice. He acts like Marcel was supposed to redeem Klaus in some way. Like there's a whole episode with a subplot about how Elijah was basically going to raise Marcel and teach him how to play piano and be super like into his life and caring for Marcel. And then he realized that Klaus was interested in managing Marcel, and he just like stepped back and abandoned Marcel to Klaus, who was like
Mm-hmm.
at that point still unstable, still not reliable, and was quite violent still with Marcel. So yeah, it's just like kind of fucked up, and not in like the fun ways that where characters are fucked up and it's like, oh, that's
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
interesting. Like, ugh.
Would you say that your opinion of him has like changed significantly since like you first watched DVD and when we first started talking and after
Mm.
everything happened on the originals, has he kind of soured for you, I guess?
Yeah, I think when I try to rewatch Vampire Diaries, he's not as like compelling anymore. And
Mm-hmm.
it's this weird thing of I know that nobody does good things on these shows. Like I know that they're all fucked up, but like and it like it's bizarre to have a sense of like betrayal or anything like that because that's not what it is. It's just like annoying. At a certain point I just find him irritating. It's like
Mm-hmm.
the hypocrisy is no longer it's no longer like a source of interesting tension. It's no longer making me go, oh, so what's going to happen now? So like, how does that work in conjunction with like he has this idea about how the world should run and how you should deal with others, but he'll let go of that for his family. So what's this new situation bringing to him and his character? Like, it's no longer about that. It's just about him being violent whenever he's
Mm-hmm.
needed to be violent, and him like constantly like dealing behind the family's backs, and like it's just not yeah, I don't know. He just like pisses me off. And also, the wiki said he's died 6 times overall, which puts him in second place behind Rick, who's died 8 times. I just wanted to point that out because, like, you do
Okay.
get to watch him die and come back a lot, and so that's like the tension gone, in my opinion.
But like he's died 6 times over like all the shows, right? Both
Yes, six
shows.
times.
Okay.
Yeah.
And Rick
Um,
died 8 times just in TVD, or has he died in Legacies too?
he's died in Legacies too, but he's now like
Okay.
in the afterworld, like he's might be coming back. He has to like apologize to people that he's hurt and stuff like that. It's
Okay.
like
All
okay,
right.
I'm waiting for my visit. I'm waiting for my apology.
That's the whole thing. But
Yeah,
yeah, um,
yeah.
yeah. Elijah was the sort of moral compass, I
Mm.
guess, pseudo moral compass of the group. That if we play Finn up a little bit more in that aspect, we might not need Elijah anymore. I guess.
I
So
feel like
if you're that pissed off with him, we can
yeah.
just ditch him.
I do feel like at a certain point Elijah and Finn can be collapsed into one another and they can be one person. Like
Okay,
we can have Phil-Elijah.
Elijah.
like
Okay.
like I at a certain point they either of them could have filled a certain role. And if you
Mhm.
imagine Elijah, but also with the anger of Finn, who knows that his younger siblings exist because Freya was taken, and he hasn't actually
Mhm.
told them that. He doesn't bring it up, but he sees that in their lack of gratitude and in their behavior, and he sees them as undeserving. And so I just think that that could add like an interesting kind of kick to Elijah, how Elijah approaches the family and how he expects the family to deal honorably in making deals with Elena and that sort of thing. Like,
Mhm.
yeah.
That is interesting.
Mm.
I like the idea of putting them into one character.
Yeah.
I like Elijah. I can
The
get
good
behind.
parts of both of them.
Yeah, I can get behind Elijah. All right,
Yeah.
nice.
Okay. Excellent. So next we have Klaus. I was trying to think of a
Oh
great way
boy,
to introduce him, but I just think I'm enamored with my first note on him, which is just a huge bitch. What do
a
you have written
huge
down
bitch.
for Klaus?
Um, the only interesting thing that I wrote down that I had forgotten is that apparently, according to the wiki, he has killed kids, and he's like not above killing children. And I was
Mm,
just like, what the fuck, man? When
yeah.
was that? When did that
Yeah.
happen? I don't remember that.
Uh, I think I know that Elijah kills a bunch of teenage girls at one point, And I
Ugh,
believe that
what?
like Klaus in general just like he doesn't care, like he just will kill other people's children. He's happy to do that, which is like a point of difference between him and Marcel, because Marcel is very much like, even if they are a witch or a werewolf, if it's a kid, I'm going to like actually save them. I'm not going
Hmm.
to let anything happen to them, no matter what else is happening in the city. So like, yeah, pretty fucked up.
That's pretty fucked up. Yeah. But what do you have on Klaus? How would you
Um,
change his character? Because he is your favorite, right?
he
So,
is my
um,
favorite.
would you change anything about him? I guess is the question.
Well, I do feel kind of put in the hot seat about saying that maybe he shouldn't kill kids, but I also think that's a really important differentiation point of difference between him and Marcel. So like
Hmm.
I'm like kind of wishy washy about that, because I think it's important to note that we don't need them to be good people. Like this is our villains episode, Mikaelsons Special. Like we
Hmm.
don't need them to be good necessarily, but I think the point at which their badness is either not fully explored, like
Hmm.
supporting slavery happening in New Orleans, and how
Or
that's not
the
actually discussed
vampire
out loud.
Nazis.
Yeah,
Yeah.
well, the vampire Nazi situation, although he was very much anti vampire Nazis. But
Okay.
because I think he had history with their leader. I think Klaus like had a history with them, and the oh, and of course the motivation of the vampire Nazis was they had swastikas and everything, but they weren't like ever explicitly anti-Semitic. They were just anti-werewolf. Is was the point of
Mm-mm.
them, which is like
Right. Okay.
it frustrates me a lot, and we could talk about it for a long time, but we won't. So, what I have written down for Klaus is I want to kill and eat him. I want to watch him kill and eat someone else, and I want that someone to be Damon. But if Damon's nicer now, then I guess maybe, maybe not that third one.
Okay. Yeah,
Um,
that does. Yeah,
yeah,
that does change things. I guess if Damon can't be like
yeah,
the target for most of our ire, he can
yeah.
kill Rick. I guess we can
Yes,
find a way
excellent,
to kill Rick with Klaus. He can
excellent.
eat.
And everyone just forgives him, like eventually.
Everyone
Hilarious.
thanks him. Like everybody
Yeah,
clapped at the end of that.
yeah. Clap if you think he should die.
Clapping for that.
Um, yeah, I actually don't have a whole lot that I would change about Klaus.
Hmm.
Not because he's perfect, but because he's perfectly destructive the way that he is, and
Mhm.
he's just so central to how we understand the family and how they kind of just all orbit around him.
Mhm.
But I also have the note that I love the promo pic of him with the massive pear that looks like a ball sack. I would like to keep that. I'd like to keep that.
It is a massive pear. I think that was the most
Yep.
shocking. Like I don't think they make a fruit that big, honestly.
Yeah.
But
Or balls, but like there
almost
it is.
whoever had those, like honestly, thank him because he
Yeah.
saved you from a problem.
Klaus Michelson, surgeon.
So yeah,
That's actually
exactly.
scary to think about. It's a little bit scary to think about. Did you have anything else
Mm.
written down for Klaus that you would like to cover before we move on to my least favorite?
Okay. Just that I think that we could kind of bring back some of his original motivation, which was
Mm-hmm.
like to break the hybrid
Original.
curse. Yeah. Uh-huh. And then to create more hybrids because he
Mm.
is lonely in a way, similar to Rebecca. So
Mm.
I like the idea of Klaus just like adopting a lot of
Mm.
people around there. He did that with Marcel and ended up
Mm-hmm.
adopting him, but just like
Yeah.
more child figures, I guess, in his life is what I think would be
Yes.
interesting.
Yeah. I think that the idea of a next generation that is comes preloaded with a lot of the problems of their kind of Michelson ancestors, but also them not being related to each other by blood is interesting. Like, I mean, I
Mm.
guess if they're all hybrids turned by the same person, like that's not exactly the same as blood relation, but like it would just
No,
be
yeah.
interesting. It would just be interesting for because obviously he's so distressed by the fact that he's a bastard, and that's such a
Mm-hmm.
huge part of his damage. So it would just be interesting for him to really like he does this slightly with Marcel, but I do not feel like Marcel was ever fully treated like Klaus's son. They could say it. They could say that's his son, that's his father. They can say it, but like I don't think that's how anybody actually behaved. But yeah, I think that the idea of him taking seriously people who he's not related to and not being obsessed, not necessarily being so obsessed with Hope because she's his blood relation. Like I feel like that was kind of a bit of a thing. Is that this is
Yeah.
his real child?
Mm-hmm.
Like it would be cool to have that not present. Mm.
I am just now thinking that my suggestion gives us more Michelsons to have to pay attention to, and that's very difficult for me. And also, it kind of makes him sound like a cult leader.
Yeah, well, he
Honestly,
is, isn't he?
well, He is.
Mm.
Would that be interesting to explore, or is that something that we probably want to shy away from? I don't
I
know.
yeah, I think that there's a way to do that sensitively ish. I think that
Probably.
not necessarily glamorizing, although like there's just to an extent anybody like killing people to a Paramore soundtrack is glamorized, but
Mhm.
but it's at what point do we acknowledge that the Michaelsons themselves kind of operate in a relatively cult leaderish way in the vampire community anyway.
Mhm.
So this is just kind of like an outgrowth of that. But yeah, it's a cool suggestion. It's a cool suggestion. I like the idea of Damon having to contend with a ton more hybrids. I think that's really funny. Like
Yes,
he just hates them so much. He hates them.
anything to make his life more difficult, even though in our version he's going to be more tolerable as a person. But I think
Mm,
that by just general animosity towards him is not
mm,
going to leave. So anything
yeah,
to make his life difficult.
yeah. I'm personally kind of obsessed with the idea of just because like Marcel as a figure, he loves kids a lot. Like he wants to protect them, he wants to look after them, and he believes that any functional society is taking care of their children. And
Mm.
it's a very personal thing for him because of the situation that he was born into personally. And so I just think that it's always going to be interesting to watch him fill a kind of like big brother role to anybody. It's like fascinating
Mhm.
when it happens with Hope, and I think it would be fascinating with anybody else. So that would be
Right.
cool.
Mhm.
Mm,
Cool. All right.
yeah.
Here we go.
Jesus Christ. Okay, we're up to Cole. What do you think about Cole, Ingrid? I'm not
I
coloring your
liked.
opinion. I'm not
Mhm.
impacting your first response. What do you think about Cole, this guy we're discussing neutrally?
Okay. So I took a look at the wiki, and I saw that he was played by the same actor who played Isaac Leahy from Teen Wolf in a while. Daniel Sharman,
Mm-hmm.
that's his name.
Yes, he
And I
was.
like that. I like that. I think that we could bring him back.
Mm.
But
Resurrect Daniel Sharman.
yeah, resurrect Daniel Sharman specifically. But um, I like what he brings to the table. I don't necessarily like him as a person, but I
Mm.
do like how wild and unpredictable he is, even more so than Klaus.
Mm.
And sort of beside him, Klaus seems to be more put together. And I do
Mm.
like that. I would like to play up just how fucking unhinged Cole is and how he
Yeah.
doesn't really care about anything because, like, Klaus does care about things. He cares about his family to an extent. He cares about, uh, that's it. But but I like the idea of Cole just not giving a fuck about anything, not even the
Mm-hmm.
people around him. I want to really play up how much of an asshole he is because I
Yeah.
think that would be an interesting dynamic with the rest of them.
Yeah, I think that maybe my problem with Cole comes from two places. First of all, and this should not impact my opinion of the text, but I'm a fallible human. I don't like how he's treated in fandom conversations as like this
Mm-hmm.
ideal guy. I know he's a bitch. He's terrible. He's just like not a good person. I don't like the fact that some of his behavior is like erased or kind of set aside in conversations about him. Second of all, like he stopped being interesting for me on the show in the original. This is again an Elijah problem, but kind of the opposite because he basically just got a girlfriend and became a good person. Like who cares about others,
Mm,
including his
okay.
family? And I just didn't feel like there was this whole like emotional sequence in and around the whole Finn and Freya stuff because he was kind of resurrected. Um, he was resurrected at the same time as Finn and Esther, like they were just in other people's bodies for a while, and then that's why he was played by Daniel Sharman, and then eventually, so he was just in a random witch's body, and then eventually he came back in his own, and like in that time period, he started dating Davina, which I do not
Mm.
like because she was like 16 or
Oof,
17
okay. Yeah.
and also was like Marcel's adopted daughter. And it was like just really like I don't know. I just really didn't like it. Like I felt like I'm
Mm-hmm,
here to
mm-hmm.
watch everybody fuck each other over. I'm not here to watch the like teen drama element and the like weird stalkerish behavior towards teen girls that was so common on Vampire Diaries. So
Yeah,
yeah, I think playing up how unhinged he is, not partnering him with a teenage girl, like I think that could
that's
work.
good.
That could work for me.
Mm-hmm.
I have written down that he's a Jeremy that eats people and has no character growth, and I think that we need to stick to those boundaries. He's a Jeremy that eats people and
Yeah,
has no character growth.
Yeah, I think that we should. Ah, that's interesting. The two of them are similar
Mm.
in that aspect of being just like the younger sibling and the quote unquote black sheep of the family.
Mm. It would
So,
be cool if like all I don't know like imprinted on Jeremy like a baby duckling, and he just doesn't know what to do with the fact that he identifies with another with a like a person, a living person. He like looks at
hmm.
the recognition of the self and the other, and he's like, oh fuck,
Oh, that'd be funny. And like that gives Jeremy something to do because
yeah.
we didn't really think of anything for him.
He's like delving into the dead. I think like he's tapping into his medium side, which Cole would know a lot about because Cole knows a lot about witches, like a ton about witches.
Right.
Because he's like I don't know. It's kind of implied that he has a witch fetish, but I don't know. I don't know if that's 100% what they intended, but it's kind of implied.
Um,
But yeah,
okay.
yeah. So he would know a lot. He would know a lot about whatever Jeremy is into. Um,
Whatever
okay,
he's into.
into yeah, medium wise.
Okay.
I don't think that we need to pair them together, but it would also be really funny. Can you imagine the like family dinners?
Ugh, ugh. I don't. I'm not sure I like that idea. I'm sorry. I don't know.
That's okay. That's okay. I only like it for the fallout, not for the actual dynamic.
Okay.
Okay.
You just like the mess.
Yes, I love some mess. I love some mess. Speaking of which, Rebecca, what do you have written down
Oh,
for Rebecca, Ingrid?
oh, Rebecca, I love her so much. Um, the fact that she doesn't hate being a vampire, but she just is so in love with the idea of being human and
Mm,
just with
mm,
humanity in general. I think that's so interesting with her as a character. And I think that she could be sort of a protector figure of humans in that sense, which Elijah tried to be, but didn't really succeed. So
mm,
maybe shifting that onto Rebecca and her being a bit more protective of the
mm,
core gang once after like she starts to like them because obviously she doesn't really like them much in the
mm.
beginning. She doesn't really like them much throughout the series, but
Yeah.
yeah.
It broke my heart when like she and Elena kind of had that rapport and then Elena daggers her.
Mm-hmm.
It's so hard. It's so hard. I think that
Right.
Rebecca as the punching bag for Klaus is like it just builds her into this space where it would be more interesting if she actually fully went against him more
Mm-hmm.
often, given
Mm-hmm.
everything that he's done and that he considers to be fine in retribution. Like she, like I believe the whole 52 years thing. Like she, Klaus spent 52 years affected by the Hunter's Curse, which was her, he considered to be her fault because she fell in love with the guy that like started the five. So he spent 52 years impacted by that, and then she had to spend 52 years daggered in payment for her crime and for what she'd done. And just
Mm-hmm.
Rebecca as somebody who's constantly trying to. At one point, she does try to escape Klaus. This is on the originals. She does try to escape him, and she actually contacts Michael and tells him that Klaus is in New Orleans. And I think that playing up both that moment historically and like currently, her relationship with him versus her love for humanity and her knowledge of what he does to humanity, I
Mm-hmm.
think that would be more interesting.
Yeah.
Is there anything major that you would change or that you don't like about her character? Because
No.
I
Uh,
have some, but it's all the originals based. So like,
okay.
I
All
want to
right.
focus on the Vampire Diaries especially.
No, but I do want to hear from you like this other perspective on Rebecca. So what don't you like her about her exactly
Um,
from the originals?
they do play up her protection of humans and especially her like protection of women. I believe.
Mm-hmm.
There's one episode called "The Casket Girls" where she it's basically implied because there's like this historical. I believe it's a real story, like it's a real part of New Orleans like mythos, which is that there are a bunch of girls who came from France at one point, I believe in the 1800s, and they like ended up being trapped in this I don't know boarding house or some kind of house, and like the windows were all boarded, and like there's this idea that maybe they were vampires, and so the show kind of took that as well, these women arrived to find husbands here, and then they were like attacked by a whole group of men in their carriage, and Rebecca saved them, which is really
Mm.
like that's nice, that's punchy, that's great. Except that Rebecca also dates and tries to marry the son of I don't know if he's the governor, but he's like some kind of political figure who owns a whole plantation full of slaves. And that's the plantation that Marcel was born on, and that governor is Marcel's biological father. And so she was trying to like marry Marcel's sort of bio half brother. And she didn't
Ooh.
really, she was never really demonstrated to have a problem with that at
Mm-hmm.
all. Um, and then also after that, because Klaus just killed her fiance, like he just killed that guy for like no reason at a party. And then at the funeral for her fiance, that's where they met Marcel. Um, like it annoys me that they didn't really delve into like if she wants to protect people and she wants to protect women, what about the other women who are involved in what's happening in the
Mm-hmm.
city? So I
Right.
guess that I would either like if we were playing up the protective role, like we really do need to. There's no like easy answer to this on especially like a podcast just talking about what we would do, but like um obviously engage black writers in a writing room situation to like talk about how to actually like not
Mm-hmm.
imply that it was fine for somebody who cares about humans that
Right.
slavery was fine.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think they actually didn't write that intentionally. They didn't write that discrepancy on purpose. It's kind of like how the Vampire Diaries acts like Damon didn't sexually assault anyone,
Mm-hmm.
but it is there. Like it's there if you look for it. So that's what annoys me because I feel like it betrays her character. And if it doesn't betray her character, then let's dig into that. Let's like actually address what the fuck is going on there.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but yeah, so that's just
Yeah.
my change. But that's not on the Vampire Diaries. So um, yeah.
But it is a valuable change to make, and like we've talked about this a little bit, but we do have to interrogate the historical context in which the Vampire Diaries just shoves itself into. Like it didn't
Mm,
have to be set in uh, the American South during the Civil War for so
mm,
much of its history, but it does. So
mm,
that is something that we need to interrogate
mm.
and talk about. And I think that it was just a lack of a black writer in the writer's room at the
Mm,
time to just
yeah.
not notice the implication of that.
I believe
So,
there were black writers on the originals, but I do think that it's important to note that, at least to my knowledge, there has never been a showrunner who was
mm,
not white.
hmm
So
hmm
like I just it's in that uncomfortable territory of like I don't want to decide how the writers in the room felt about it. I don't want to like be vague and speculate about how they felt about it. Um, but also it was not necessarily their final decision. Like these
hmm
stories are
hmm
just constantly in the hands of ultimately white people as showrunners. So
right. Hmm
I'm happy to be corrected if anybody listening knows of any other different situation or anything like that. But like, yeah, it's just complicated. Um,
hmm Yeah,
yeah.
definitely. But otherwise, in terms of Rebecca's personality and her trajectory in the original show, The Vampire Diaries, is there anything that
Mm,
you would add or change or want to explore more?
mm. I think that I mean we all kind of refer to Rebecca as bisexual, but she just like kisses one. She kisses Nadia like
Hmm
once, and so I guess like I would want to like not that that's completely unusual in general for
hmm
bi women to have most of their experiences be with men, but it would just
hmm
be nice to like because I'm not even 100% sure that that was supposed to be written as like yes this character is attracted to women. I am not 100% sure given the time period in which it was written, like that maybe it was
And the
just
context, it was just
yeah
like
of
it was
like
just fan service.
Matt
Yeah,
watching it like
yeah, it was.
like that maybe it was more about Matt having a great time in Europe than it was about like
Hmm
oh Rebecca is bisexual. So it'd be
Yeah, yeah.
nice to like um delve into that a little more sensitively, or even not just
hmm
sensitively but just like more like
Yeah.
let's let's just do that more. It'd be cool if she actually was really into Nadia. That would be funny because Nadia is like Catherine's daughter and Rebecca
hmm
hates Catherine. That would be
Yeah,
so hilarious. That'd be so funny.
that would be funny. It would be pretty fucked up. But
Mm,
yes, I do agree 100% that Rebecca should be like a bi icon, just
mm.
like Matt, and that's
Yes.
why they get together because it's by
Mm.
uh, I don't
Solidarity.
know, so solidarity, I guess. But they're attracted
Mm.
to each other, so they're just dating. So it's just
Mm.
like yeah,
Yeah.
it'd be great. I
I
miss
agree.
Matt.
I do miss Matt too. We need to like rewatch sometime, but just like Matt scenes. I wonder if there's anybody on YouTube who has ever just tried to compile Matt
Of
scenes.
course
They've
not. Nobody
definitely done
cares
that for
about him.
they've definitely done that for Damon, for Stefan, for Klaus. Like I wonder if anybody's ever done that for Matt. We'll have to figure that out sometime. So, Henrik, probably the least information on him because
Mm-hmm.
he was not there for very long, was he? What was
Mm.
your kind of impression of Henrik, and I guess less him as a person and more the role that he played in the family?
He is the catalyst to everything that happens. Like his death is why the original vampires become vampires.
Mm.
So that's something that I think that if he were to come back, could be explored. Like
Mm.
I don't know if guilt would be the right thing to
Mm.
say because it wasn't his fault. He didn't choose it.
Mm. But how would he
But it
feel
is,
about it? Like,
yeah, it is a consequence of him directly. So
mm.
would he be like Finn? Would he despise vampires, or would he? I don't know. How would he react to that? I guess.
I think it would be interesting to either like there's like one of two options is that like he comes back and then is an adult when he kind of re-enters their lives. I like that we've
Hmm.
just decided that he should come back.
Right.
That he
Exactly.
like comes back and re-enters their lives as an adult, or he comes back and he's the same age and he's at the same point in time. He's the same little boy who would go into the woods to watch the werewolves just because he loved Klaus so much. And so, like, for
Hmm.
him to see not only how the world has changed, but how his family has changed and broken up, um, I think that that would be like, I want him to hate them, like, to be like
Hmm.
heartbroken. I just think that that's really compelling. And I think that there would be a way to do that because now because we're still going in age order, so like now we're on to Henrik, Marcel, and Hope. I just think that that would in general be a really interesting connector of this sort of like new generation ish, because like Henrik is of their generation, but he's still like would be quite young in this scenario. Like it's just like this
Hmm.
incredible, I don't know, tying together of things, which is that the people of the following generation who are supposedly benefiting from the grown-ups in their lives who have helped to raise them,
Hmm.
or with their older siblings, don't agree. They don't agree with how it worked, and they don't think that it was worth it, or they have problems with how it's happened. Like I just think that's heartbreaking.
Hmm. Yeah, definitely. And the idea of him coming back in itself is heartbreaking because imagine being so young and
Mm,
just having everything about your worldview just shift and do a complete 180. And that would
mm,
be interesting to explore as well. Like, how does he
mm,
react to the world and to his family the way
mm.
that it is now with
Yeah.
the maturity of someone who died at the age that he did
Mm.
and who is immortal now too, or is maybe he's mortal
Maybe he's just
and he
human. That would be
maybe, yeah,
terrifying.
maybe he's the only Mikaelson who's human. So
Mm.
I
Yeah.
don't know. That sounds really
Yeah.
cool.
I have written down, I think Henrik taking Marcel's side on anything would have been so narratively epic, my tits would have blown right off. So that's where I'm at. I just think that the enmity of between Marcel and Klaus benefits from somebody else who Klaus is so weak, like in the face of them and
Hmm.
who they are and what they represent, taking Marcel's side. I just think that that's so fascinating because it's so often Marcel versus Klaus slash Elijah slash Rebecca, etc. Oh, and that's actually my other note for Rebecca is that she falls in love with her brother's adopted son, and I don't really like that. So let's not do that.
What?
She falls in love with Marcel, and there's like a
Oh, oh
whole
yeah, oh yeah, 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 yeah.
there's a
Okay,
whole
okay, 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 okay.
sequence there's a whole sequence of her teaching him how to fence as a child, and then like flashes immediately to her teaching him to fence as like now he's a grown-up and he's shirtless for some reason, and then like
Okay.
they're kissing and making out. Like let's not do that. Actually, I'm not into that.
Oh,
I don't love that.
yeah. I don't like
This
that
is your
either.
really fucked up aunt Marcel, and you don't like her very much, but she loves humanity, and she doesn't want you to kill humans. Like I think that there's like a cool dynamic there to be had that's not romantic at all, because Marcel
Mhm.
obviously was at that point the only human member of the Mikaelson family, and then he became a vampire because he basically forced Klaus to turn him. So like, what if Rebecca really didn't want him to become a vampire?
Mhm.
That would just be kind of fascinating. Was there anything else you wanted to cover on Henrik? Because we've seemed to have transitioned straight into Marcel. So
No, I think that this is a valuable transition to make. I think that
they're all so
it's
connected. They're so connected.
yes, it's
Mm.
it feels organic. So let's talk about Marcel. I'm sure that you have nothing to say about him at all. So what do you
I've
think?
said a lot. I've said a lot already. He's my favorite because he's my favorite. Like I don't think he would. He doesn't identify as Michelson. I believe he uses the surname of his biological father, which is an interesting choice that I don't think was ever fully explored.
Mm.
Um, but yeah, he's my favorite because I think that he brings the best arguments. He's like very much embodies the he's like quite similar to Stefan if Stefan was also like super into just like killing people as long as they were adults. Like he just thinks it's fine. Like he just thinks that's okay because that's who he is. That's what he is. Like he's a Stefan that's very comfortable in what he is. And it's
Mm-hmm.
like also has grown up in this dynamic that kind of requires him to like he wants to have power because that makes him comfortable because he doesn't trust the other people who would be powerful, like
Mm-hmm.
Klaus. So I just think that he's very fascinating in terms of that. But what's your kind of like? I know you haven't seen the show. It's such an unfair question. What's your overall opinion of Marcel as he's not a hybrid, but as well? I mean, technically, maybe he is by now. But what's your opinion of Marcel as like this adopted child sort of figure in Klaus's life?
I did watch, I think, the first two episodes of the original.
Mm,
So I know that Marcel is very charming, very charismatic, just like Klaus. But I do love what you said about him being a Stefan who's more comfortable in himself. So I love the idea of him and Stefan interacting.
mm,
So we could totally bring Marcel to the Vampire Diaries and just putting them together in a room and letting
mm,
them talk. I guess
mm.
I don't even know what situation that would be,
They can
but
play. They can play. What is it called? What's up with that?
we could play. What the fuck is up with
Oh
that?
yeah, what the fuck
Yes,
is up with that?
yes. You
Um,
remembered. I'm gonna cry. I feel so proud. I'm gonna cry.
for the uninitiated, well, it's a quiz basically, so I'm very into it. For the uninitiated, what the fuck is up with that is a game that is played between the player characters on Critical Role in campaign 3. So it's basically just a chance to make your characters like ask each other questions and reveal character important information. So they could just play. We just have one episode that's just everybody in different groupings playing what the fuck is up with that.
That sounds perfect. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Ah, that'd be so funny.
But as for like him as Klaus's adopted son, from the
Mm,
little I've seen and from what you've told me, I do think that they don't treat him like that. They it's all lip service. They say that he's a member of the family and that he's Klaus's adopted son, but they don't treat him in the same way. So I think
mm,
resentment because of that could be really interesting to play up and explore. But
yeah.
honest, I don't know enough about Marcel to say I'm sorry.
Mm. No, no, that's fine. Um, I have a lot of notes. It's all mostly things that I could just talk about for a whole separate episode. I do think that we should just point out that I do think the plot overall and how his being born enslaved was handled was not very great.
Mm-hmm.
I think particularly because he's treated like a possession by the Mikaelsons, and I don't, from
Mm-hmm.
what I remember, it's never really explicitly connected um, is like how he feels about having to go strike out on his own and be his own person and be and have this role, this leadership role, and fight Klaus for power. How that would be informed by the fact that they didn't really save him from being owned because they still treated him like a possession. He was still treated
Mm-hmm.
like he was supposed to do something for them. He was supposed to perform this, like, I hate to say, this emotional labor of rescuing Klaus from himself.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so, like, I just don't like. I don't think that they really deserve devotion from him. So I always like it when he is against them. I always think that
Mm-hmm.
that's interesting and I don't know. I would want more time in like whatever show this happened in. I would want more time of Marcel versus Klaus and Hope as like old enough to express her own opinion, what she thinks about that. Because
Mm-hmm.
Marcel is more Hope's brother than he, in my opinion, the show writes him more as Hope's brother than ever as Klaus's son. So
Mm-hmm.
um, it would be cool to see that dynamic because he cares about her. Naturally, he considers her to be his sister. He refers to her that way. He like treats her that way. Um, you know,
Mm-hmm.
so also you may not know this, but Marcel is connected to Haley's side of the family as well. So it's not
Mm.
just Marcel and the Mikaelsons. He actually knew and was, from what I understand, was close friends with Haley's dad. So there's a
Oh wow.
point, yeah. So like
Okay.
he was not fully against the werewolves at certain points in time. Like he, at some points, was in communication with them. It wasn't a whole like vampires versus werewolves situation. Like he
Mm-hmm.
was close with them. And at one point, he does offer. Oh yeah, Marcel. Sorry, I missed the biggest headline in that. He's actually the reason that Haley has gone from the city is because her parents were murdered, and the person who got her out of the city before she could be murdered as well was Marcel. He
Of
actually like,
course.
took her and sent her out of the city. And at one
Mm-hmm.
point in the first season, she is about to give birth, and he says, "If you want to leave, I'll take you out of the city so that this baby isn't born here. Like you can go." Which I imagine that Klaus would have straight up killed him for. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, so like he has that connection with Haley's side as well. So I would love to play into that a bit more, and
Right.
his relationship with her family, because that is by choice. He chose to save her. He chose to be close with her dad. And he comments that Haley is like her father and stuff like that. So like Hope is the embodiment not just of this bitter relationship he has with Klaus, but also she's the product of people who he cared for and he chose to care for. So
That's awesome. Yeah, I love that idea. I love giving Haley, I guess, that support and
mm,
exploring that a bit more. That's really cool. Awesome.
yeah,
I love him. I
yeah.
I don't know much about him, but I know that I love him.
Where where are our Matt Donovan and Marcel Gerard only scene packs on YouTube?
Exactly.
Where's our Marcel Gerard and Matt Donovan fan cams? Where are our like so you can
Where are
just
their fan
consume
cams?
um the originals or like any show that you want just like with that one specific character. I mean we know where they are. If they might exist and we just haven't seen them or they just don't exist at all. So moving on to Hope, another person that I won't ramble on about because
That I
because
know
you
even less
unfortunately
about.
know nothing about. What's your
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
opinion of Hope? How do you think of Hope when you imagine her and what she's up to in the world and what she means to the Mikaelson family?
Um, I don't know. I guess that it's such a big part of the originals. I know, but plot lines involving like miracle babies or babies that are going to like do something important, I guess. I don't know. I'm not that big of a fan, so
Mm-hmm.
I don't have a particular opinion on Hope as a character. I don't want to say this in front of you, so I'm not
Say it in
going
front
to.
of me. Say it in front of
No,
me.
I don't know.
I'll
Just
turn
like
around.
we are in the same room. If you guys didn't know,
I'll stop
uh,
looking at your voice on the waveform in Zencaster.
she's really neither here nor there for me. So
hmm.
her presence or lack thereof wouldn't
Yeah.
make much of a difference for me.
Hmm. Well,
But
she's not
I
Vampire
imagine,
Diaries.
yeah,
Like so.
I imagine that she's super important in the originals, and
Mm-hmm.
she definitely she definitely changes a lot of them in
Mm-hmm.
important ways. So, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
that's my piece. I'm
Yeah.
sorry. I feel
No, that's
bad.
fine. I think that Hope is the one that would. I mean, she could technically fit into like a Vampire Diaries type situation. Like it would be interesting to see everyone's reaction to her because they already have these like established opinions about her family, both her dad
Mm-hmm.
and her mother. I mainly appreciate her because I really like fucked up like Antichrist shit. Like she is
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
like considered to be like it's prophesied, and I don't think this has happened or been addressed as not real anymore. Like she's prophesied to um, destroy the witches in New Orleans at some point. It's like I like that kind of
okay.
destiny of like not actually like she's technically good for the family, but she's not good for anybody else. Like she's like
Mm-hmm.
bad, and she can do sick stuff power wise. But I do understand that the main appeal of Hope are just things that don't happen on the Vampire Diaries.
Mm.
Because outside of that, she's just super abstract and something that could either be exciting or not. So
I remember you telling me about a dagger that she made out of blood. I thought that was
yeah,
sick.
and she used it to kill
Um,
her boyfriend. Yeah, it was very cool.
that's fantastic.
Yeah, it was cool.
But
It
what
was very
about you? Would you bring Hope to the Vampire Diaries? We're kind of like
cool. Yeah,
condensing three shows into one, but
yeah.
I don't know. What do you
I
have
think
to say about her?
I think there's a point at which it's too cluttered.
Mm-hmm,
And while I
mm-hmm,
do
mm-hmm.
enjoy the role that she plays in the original shows, um,
It was already cluttered like on the Vampire
mm,
Diaries. We don't need
yeah,
to bring more characters.
yeah. I think that um, the idea of Klaus moving beyond blood relations in how he sees even the
Mm-hmm,
messed up dynamics with people who are positioned as his children, either because he's adopted them or because he's taking care of them, that kind of thing. Like, I think that that is, to me, like fundamentally just sitting here talking about something that doesn't exist. Like, that's more interesting to me, even if I am fascinated by her and how she works. And I like enjoy. I love characters who are accused of being Mary Sue's. It's just my favorite thing. She was literally born on an
mm-hmm,
altar, like, and she makes knives out
mm-hmm,
of blood. Like, that's sick. But I do, yeah, I do understand. Like, it's hard to imagine a place for her overall in the
Mm-hmm.
show's dynamic. So,
Mm-hmm.
and we are definitely like I'm putting this boundary in place for myself. We are not discussing like rebooting spin-offs.
Because we
I
can't,
can't do
because
that.
I haven't seen it, and I'm
You
not
haven't.
going to. I'm because it's
Yeah.
just too much. I'm
Yeah.
sorry.
Yeah. It's just too
I
much.
can watch I can watch hundreds of hours of people playing Dungeons and Dragons, but I draw the
Yeah.
line at spin-offs of the Vampire Diaries because I made it through the first show
You did. I'm so proud of you.
just because I was a teenager and I had nothing better to do. But but now I have a job,
Yeah.
so
We're working professionals now. There's no time.
yeah.
There's no time to
Mhm.
commit to something that you don't fully love. So,
Yeah.
um, I will assume that you have nothing else to add on the Hope Michelson point.
No, I don't.
Excellent. So I don't know if you've found anything else hysterically funny while researching the characters like on the wiki, but I found two things that are really really good that I wanted to end on.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so the first is that Finn and Elijah never speak to each other directly on the Vampire Diaries.
Really? Oh my god. But
Never.
they do. There is an episode where, like, in the originals, right? Because I remember there's
Mm.
an episode where Matt's in it, and I remember
Yes.
watching that because it's Matt.
Yeah, and
But
Finn and Elijah, they're talking to each other. Yeah,
okay,
they do. They talk in Every Mother's Son, which is, I think it's the second episode in the second season of the originals, or maybe it's
okay,
the first. I don't know. But the first
all
time they
right.
talk, I think Finn is in Vincent's body. So,
Mm.
Vincent, classic.
Vincent.
Um, yeah, and also my second one is that this is the exact quote from the trivia. And I did try and look up some scenes to see if this was true or not. It's like impossible for me to rewatch the whole show to know this is true, so I'm trusting the wiki here. But
Mm.
Klaus only feeds his blood directly from the wrist to females. For males, he drips his blood into a container. He made an
Oh,
exception when he sired Marcel and let him drink from his wrist before killing him. But other than that, he does
oh my
not
god.
feed men from the wrist.
No, he's no homo in anything.
Oh, oh,
Oh.
incredible. So, thank you for hanging out with me today, Ingrid.
Thank you so much. I feel like I learned a lot, and it was nice to sort of revisit some of old favorites that I actually do know things about. So
Yeah,
yeah,
nice
it was
mix.
great.
Nice mix.
It was a nice, yeah, a nice mix of emotions here.